Well, greetings and salutations, everyone. We are that much closer to tonight's live stream. Cannot wait. 12 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Before we get into any of this, though, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership are in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman, Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost you a cent. Click that like button. It takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon. And folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all these things, they really do help this channel to continue to grow and go. And yeah, they really matter. Now, everyone, I've taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to today's upload, shall we? In tonight's first encounter, I'll start off by saying I've never really believed in anything paranormal. I'm a pretty science-based guy. I always look for a logical explanation, and I still am for this experience. I live just south of Charleston, South Carolina. I haven't had much time for leisure with work in the past year. I've been having to accept some pretty awful shifts to get by with the pandemic. So I've lost my ability to go on my evening walks, which are a method of stress release for me. It had been a while since I was able to go on one. So a couple of nights ago, I decided to just go on a late night walk. I put on my headlamp and decided to take a path I hadn't in ages. There's a small path near the back of my neighborhood that goes about 4 miles deep into the woods. My plan was to walk about 1.5 miles in and take the parallel path to come back out. I make it down around 1.3 miles according to the Fitbit, and I start getting the feeling like I'm being watched. I turn off my headlamp and sit and listen. At this point, I'm concerned there's a guy following me who is up to no good. I hear clear footsteps in the leaves off the trail, and they've been behind me for about 5 minutes. I stopped thinking it was an animal or another walker and became worried, sitting there for maybe 3 to 4 minutes, and I hear nothing at all. I turn on my headlamp and decide to start walking quickly back home. 2 minutes later, I hear the footsteps again. This time, it's different. It sounds like 4 feet instead of 2 walking, and it's walking at the same increased speed I am. I turn around quickly with my headlamp and phone flashlight and point it behind me. Silence. I get angry and yell out, "Leave me alone. I'm going to call the police. And if you come at me, I've got a knife." Silence. I yell again, "Get out of here," and start walking towards where I heard the walking coming from. About 20 yards out, hard to fully make out because the flashlight doesn't reach that far. I see what looks like a literal naked man running full speed on all fours into the woods. And there were some details that led me to believe this was not a person. For one, it was hairless, completely bald, pale white skin. And the way it ran on all fours looked natural. Not like when you try to run on fours and look stupid. It looked like its bone structure was designed to walk on all fours. There was no hunched look. The back was flat, and it was fast. Last thing that happened is straight out of a horror movie. I hadn't heard anything in a while on my way back, but I kept turning around to be sure. With about 0.3 miles left to go until I was in the clear, I heard a mad dash through the leaves. I whip around and it stops on a dime. I see the edges of its head behind the tree. I yell out loudly, trying to intimidate it. What I heard next I will never forget for the rest of my life. It cackled like a monkey, a noise I've literally only heard in nature documentaries. The tone was that of mockery, a predator having fun. I didn't stick around and sprinted as fast as I could back home. I'd love to believe this was some prank or some rabid, bald, diseased coyote. But I got a pretty good look at it, and it was not. It had human feet and human hands, a human head, and a human-like buttocks. But nothing else about it was human. I called the police after and told them that there was a man following me. I didn't want to say some creature because they'd think I was crazy. They didn't find anything, but they did see quite a bit of activity in the leaves and dirt about 50 feet from where the trail was, leading far back into the woods before it got to a large stretch of grass, where no footprints were seen. Please, someone tell me I'm crazy, or that this is some elaborate prank or a deformed feral person. I don't know. Alright, so tonight's first video we're going to take a look at is what appears to be a hiker taking a hike, and it looks like they've come to kind of like an underpass bridge or whatever, and there is something off to the side that he doesn't see at first, but then it catches his attention, and whatever it is takes off through the grass in the opposite direction. Now, it's really not the clearest video, but you can definitely see that there is something there, and that it's not human. It's pretty creepy. Take a look. Very interesting video. Like I said, you can clearly see that there is something there. Something moves. You just can't clearly see what it is. But nonetheless, it is terrifying if you put yourself in that person's shoes that's taking that video. On to today's second experience. Tonight's second experience. I spent 10 years of my youth homeless, drifting across Canada, hitchhiking and riding freight trains across every province. I never knew where I wanted to call home, so I just traveled this beautiful country to see which places I liked best. I have many years of experience with trapping and wilderness survival, so being stranded in places has never been an issue for me. This particular experience happened the summer of 2013. I was hitchhiking out of Williams Lake, British Columbia, but it was getting late and I was having a hard time getting picked up on a small shoulder at the edge of town, until one man pulled over and said, "I can't drive you very far, but there's a roadside rest stop a few kilometers down the highway, and I think you might have better luck there." I agree. The man drove me to the rest stop, and from there I pulled out my cardboard sign that said East in bold black Sharpie. I stood there for a couple hours to no avail until it finally got too dark, and obviously your chances of being picked up at night are slim to none. I decided to hike off into the woods and set up my tarp and sleeping bag, and my plan was to sleep through the night, and in morning I would walk back out to the highway and try again. So there I go, flashlight in hand, walking into the brush off the highway. I have always had a hard time sleeping with trucks and big rigs, so I hiked about 2 to 250 meters into the brush off the highway, so that some of the sound of the traffic wouldn't be so deafening. I set up my tarp in an A-frame configuration between two trees. The tarp draped over a tight line of paracord and pinned down with tent pegs. This has been my go-to shelter for many years. It was around 11 p.m., now pitch black outside. I didn't bother to get a fire going because I was exhausted from walking all day with my 30-pound backpack. I crawled into my sleeping bag, and I was out like a light. In the middle of the night, I awoke to tree branches cracking all around me, big branches. Whatever it was big. I had heard heavy panting and breathing, but the scary part was that it sounded like human breathing and very close, right outside of my tarp. I thought it might have been a bear, but in my mind, there's no way it was a human because I was in a pretty remote area, and it was like 3 a.m., super unlikely it would be anyone deliberately trying to mess with me. And there were no cars parked at the roadside turnout parking lot earlier that night when I retreated into the woods. I am positive nobody saw me walk back into the woods. I was paralyzed with fear and lying perfectly still, holding my knife and my flashlight, which was turned off. Then, the next thing I know, a huge log gets thrown and collapses my entire tarp on top of me. I start screaming as loud as I could and climb out with my knife. I lit my flashlight, and whatever it was ran off into the brush. I never got a good view of it, but all I could see was it was very tall. Then I look at the log that had gotten thrown, and I was in awe. It missed my head by mere inches and pinned my tarp into the dirt below. It was about 8 feet long and maybe 10 inches in diameter. It would have killed me. I built a fire using whatever sticks were lying around the small clearing where I had my camp. I kept looking in all directions with my flashlight. I was terrified. I figured if I had a fire, it may ward off whatever it was that had just thrown this log at me. At any rate, I had no intention of staying long. I took apart my shelter, rolled up my tarp, and packed everything up because I was getting out of here. It took some serious muscle to move that log that had my tarp pinned down. Once I was packed up, I then walked back to the highway and waited until dawn before trying to catch a ride. Felt safer there. Whatever threw that log was no bear, and I know it was not a human. I initially thought the log might have been a broken off tree limb from the tree above me, but that was not the case. All the trees in my vicinity were alive and well. It was thrown. Williams Lake, British Columbia has been a known hotspot for Bigfoot sightings, and to this day, I am convinced that what I encountered that night was, the fact, a legendary Sasquatch. Alright guys, tonight's second video is a person camping. They're videoing this, and in their camper, they usually do like nature videos. In their, or on their kind of camper, they have outside cameras and an inside camera. Well, they hear this kind of strange noise outside of their camper and start looking at the monitor. And, well, here is what they saw.
Did you see that thing? I wonder if the outside camera got it.
Okay, like I stated prior to watching this video, she does not do like cryptid or any kind of paranormal. She's strictly like camping and holistic healing. So you can clearly see something moving very quickly in the background in the woods. On to tonight's third experience. Tonight's third experience. The setting is an extremely rural house in eastern Kentucky, the kind of place where you would have to drive 20 miles to get to civilization. A young girl around the age of 10 is playing fetch with a 90-pound German Shepherd police dog that had just been retired from the force. The girl threw the ball, and it hit a tree right to her, sending it behind her. The dog charged off behind her to get the ball. Just then the dog's body was thrown past her and hit a tree with a loud thud, knocking it unconscious. Then a hard object slammed into the back of her head, knocking her out. When she awoke, she recognized the terrain, and she knew she was deep in the woods. She also felt her body getting dragged along the forest floor, pulled by the back of her hair. The young girl screamed, scaring whatever was dragging her, making the entity drop her. She then ran off back in the direction of her home. She turned her head to see a pale white, emaciated figure with black eyes chasing after rapidly gaining ground. This creature caught up to the little girl and grabbed the front of her hair, with her kicking and screaming into the woods. The little girl struggled in vain to get away, but the animal was too strong for her. The crawler dragged her into the riverbed and dunked her head into the water, attempting to drown her. Then she heard a loud cracking sound, loud enough to be heard underwater. The crawler had let her go. She pulled her head out of the water to see the police dog with a vice-like grip firm on the crawler's upper forearm. The arm hung limp, and she could tell it had been broken. The crawler tried and failed to lift the dog, but lacked the strength to do so. She then ran back home, leaving her dog to fight this creature. Her parents consulted her and believed her. A day later, the dog had not returned. Another day passed, and still no dog. Then, on the evening of the third day, the dog hobbled out of the woods, its body covered in cuts and lacerations. It also had a lot of caked blood around its mouth. The dog made a full recovery and ended up living 3 years after this fight with this creature. This story confirms the idea that these creatures are fragile in comparison to other cryptids, and if a dog was able to take down a crawler, which wouldn't surprise me, as a 90-pound German Shepherd dog can take down a 300-pound man, then perhaps they are even weaker than we thought. Tonight's third video is a urban explorer going into a tunnel, and at first he hears this kind of god-awful screech. Then he turns and runs after seeing some sort of large, very creepy cryptid.
What the hell? Hello?
Its final encounter. This all started back in January of 2020. I live in the Front Range of Colorado, meaning that once the mountains stop, it's basically plains for miles and miles. There are lots of small roads and strange dead ends around these parts, and one of these is a favorite of mine and my friends, as it goes a long way out from the main road with basically no reason for anyone else to be there. This privacy is great for any variety of teenage shenanigans. I was in the back of my friend's car as we drove down the road, hoping to park at the end. As I was staring out the window, I swore I saw a silhouette of a tall, strangely proportioned person running alongside our car. It was far out into the field, and I convinced myself that it was just my mind playing tricks on me so I wouldn't freak out, and I didn't tell my friends so it wouldn't bother them. We parked for a couple of hours, turned the lights off, and then went home with nothing else amiss. Recently, I was heading back out to the spot with my girlfriend, both of us in separate cars. My drive up was pretty uneventful, but there was some fog that made it pretty spooky. Once we parked, my girlfriend hopped into my car and was obviously super freaked. Once I got her to calm down, she told me what had happened. On the drive up, she had looked out her window and saw a tall, dark humanoid figure, exactly what I had seen 11 months earlier. This time it was just standing there, staring. As soon as she made eye contact with it, her car radio turned to static. She pretty quickly turned it off and hauled ass to meet up with me. I cannot stress enough how little she believes in the supernatural, so seeing her as freaked out as she was definitely left me uneasy. I helped calm her down and then hopped out of the car to take a leak. I know, literally the stupidest move ever, but at the time I hadn't remembered what had happened to me previously. While I was out there, I definitely felt like something was watching me. But I'm generally an anxious person, so I brushed it off. As I was the only one going to be out there for like 30 seconds. When I stood up and went back to the car, my girlfriend looked absolutely terrified, and she was staring over my shoulder, not at me. My first thought wasn't anything supernatural. We're both girls. So I assumed some creepy whatever had crawled out of the grass and was standing right behind me, wanting to hurt us. When I tell you I flew into the driver's seat, I mean it. My flight reaction was 100%. Once I slammed the door, I looked over at her and yelled, "What?" As far as I could tell, there wasn't anyone there. She told me that she heard a faint female voice coming from the grass exactly like ours. We were in an open plain, so there was no way it was our echoes. Whatever it was out there was mimicking us. The mimicking is what did it for me, and I knew we had to leave ASAP, especially as I had deciphered my hazy memories of the last time I saw whatever this thing was. I didn't tell my girlfriend exactly what was wrong. I just turned around so my headlights were on her car so that she could get in there quickly. Once we were safely away, I called her and told her my thoughts. We were both pretty spooked. I haven't been back there since, and I don't believe I will be going back anytime soon. Guys, and tonight's last video is a hiker hiking through the woods. He pretty uneventful hike until he spots something in the distance. You can see, for those of you who are going to be like, well, it's two different film footages. It isn't, and it is. He's recording what he's hiking as he's hiking, and when he captures whatever he captures, he then goes home and slows it down so we can see what he saw. So here is that footage right now. All right, guys, like I said, we are that much closer to tonight's live stream. I am looking forward to it. I've got a lot of stuff I want to talk to you about. I've got a lot of experiences. I am so excited about tonight. Guys, with that being said, please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, our pets, our family, and friends. These creatures are real, they are out there, and they are dangerous. If we share a little bit of information with the people that we love and care about, it may just save their life someday. Until next time, God bless you all.